right, a couple things then as we get started. First thing, get rid of that there. I forgot about it until this morning to put the lectures from yesterday out there. The first one is already out there on the YouTube channel. If for whatever reason you need to look at it. The second one right now is being produced. That's why it says deleted video. But as soon as it's produced, I'll throw that one out there too. Right here, and I'll put this in an email and send it all out to you this morning, just in case you don't have it. This is the URL for the playlist. Okay, so you can go out there at any time, and it's more important if you miss a day. You know, if you're here all the time, you're probably not going to have any problems with it, but if you do miss, you know, and you want to know what you missed, etc. All right? Okay, now yesterday, and I sent this to all of you. They did send me PDFs of the first 3 chapters, so all of you have those now, so even if you didn't get the book. So I'm just going to go off those PDFs. I did chapter 1 yesterday, but I'm going to do chapter 2, at least 2 and 3 today. What we're going to do, I think, is we're going to look at some stuff, and then we're going to get right on and start to do something, and then look at some more stuff and keep doing it that way. I think it's going to work out better like that. If it doesn't, and if you think this is too hard to, whatever, you don't like the format or whatever, just let me know. That's fine. I mean, I'm open, willing to sit and talk about it. I don't have any problem with that whatsoever. So what I'm going to do then is someplace over here. That's not it. That's it. Okay, so I went through chapter 1 already, so I'm just going to buzz by that. Did anybody have any questions on anything in chapter 1 that we went over yesterday? Was there anything that didn't make any sense? All right, so I'm going to just jump right into chapter 2 then. And you notice in here, one of the things that we're going to talk about in here is validation. So once we create a document, we're going to create at least 2 documents today, at least one .html document and at least one .css document. We will validate both of those. There's 2 different validators, just so you know. There's a validator for HTML and there is a validator for CSS. Actually, there are a lot of validators. All right, but if I go out here to the internet and I just key in here for my Google search term, HTML validator. If I can spell it right. All right. The first one that comes up is the one that most people use. And it's the W3C Markup Validation Service. All right. And there's the address, etc. So I'll just put them both up here just so you've got them. But we are going to eventually today take a look at both of these. So that's the first one. So that's the HTML validator. All right. The other one, and I'll do the same thing here. So I'm going to come in here and type in CSS validator. And we want the one that's got the word jigsaw in it. That's right here. These are both W3 things. I'm going to show you how to use them. They're really and truly not difficult. All right. So those are the 2 sites. And again, if you don't need the you don't need that part. So you can just do this or this. And that is what we're going to do today. All right. Now, I'm not even going to guarantee because I'm basically doing this off the top of my head here. But what we will do is, my guess is when we start to do this, that the stuff will validate just fine. But you know what? After we get it to validate just fine, we're going to break it on purpose. Why? Because you're eventually going to get errors when you do this. We all do. Anybody who says, yeah, I can write all these documents, geez, I write all the time, I never make an error. They're lying. Sorry, they just are. I've never met anybody that phenomenal. All right. So like I said, we will take a look at it. They look very similar to one another when you bring them up. I will tell you that if you go on to this one, again, this is the HTML validator. If you go on to there and you try to validate a CSS document, all right, you're going to have problems because it's the wrong type of document. If you go on to here and you try to validate an HTML document, you're going to have problems because, again, it's the wrong type of document. All right. So they, like I said, they pretty much, they look very similar to one another. So this is the W3, and when you look at it, geez, which is which here? You know, it's like, look here and look there. Well, the one says just markup validation. The other one says CSS. All right. Now, when we go through this, there's at least 3 different ways you can do it. And guess what? I'm only going to show you one way because I'm going to show you the way I think is the easiest way. All right. I might show you a couple of ways because the other one, it has to do with using a file. And maybe you'll find that easier, but most people don't. All right. So we will learn that amongst other things in this chapter, how to validate. We start going through and learning both HTML syntax and CSS syntax. I will tell you, I've shown you this site yesterday, but I'm going to put in here HTML tag list. You don't have to do this. You don't have to follow, etc. But if you look in here, I've got HTML element reference. I think this is the one on W3 schools. All right. So when you look right here, if you look at me doing this here, there are somewhere around 100 or so, give or take. That's HTML. Those are all the tags. You'll notice if you look at these that some of them are red. And if they're red, it means they're deprecated. What that means is technically you're not supposed to use them anymore. They still work, but all new development, there are better ways of doing it. They're older tags. All right. Somebody asked me once what deprecated means, or what it meant, and another student answered, it's like us. We're all deprecated. We're not, like it or not, you're not going to last forever. I said, well, I guess that's sort of true. But at the same time, even though these are deprecated, you can still use them. And I'm going to very quickly give you an example. Don't worry about writing it down or anything like that. And I'm not even going to use our editor. I'm just going to bring up another editor just so you can see this. So if I were to come in here and type a line of text, I like cake. All right. And if I wanted the word like to be bolded, with me? If I want it to be bolded, the way you used to do it was like this. And it was pretty darn easy when you think about it. And that still works. That B means bold. The problem is, over time, people who had, like, for example, browsers for the blind, where their browser talks to them, they did not all handle the B tag in the same way. So for accessibility reasons, they changed that tag. Unfortunately, now it's a little bit harder. What do I mean? Well, now instead of saying B, you use the word strong. So it's more typing. You'll still see millions, if not billions, of sites with B tags. I know people who are developers that still use them. Why? Because it's 4 or 5 less letters to type. But again, if you're trying to create a website that's going to be totally accessible to all, the recommendation is you don't use the B tag anymore. You use the strong tag in much the same way. Bring this down a little bit. It used to be if you wanted to italicize something, you used an I tag. Well, it's not so bad now, but now you use EM, which is short for emphasis. So it's not that you can't use these deprecated tags, but the recommendation is for all new website development, you use the newer tags. But I will tell you, because in my first programming job, one of the first things they asked me to do, my boss came up to me, I should have known better. He kind of put his arm around me, which I didn't like anyway. But he put his arm around me, he said, if I got an opportunity for you, I should have just ran. But he wanted me to go through about 1,000 lines of code, and there were some errors in there. He wanted me to find the errors and fix them. It took about a week. I didn't know the language. I was learning the language as I was doing this. But I got it. And then I ran the program, and I noticed there were 700 warnings. In about 1,000 lines, 700 warnings. It means almost every line of code had a warning on it. And I showed him, and I said, do you want me to fix these warnings? And he said, does the program work now? I said, yeah. And he goes, then screw it. You know, he's like, no, we don't have time to do this. The reason I'm telling you this is if you go out and you bring up, for example, CNN.com, okay, and you put that through the validator, you're going to find lots and lots and lots of errors in there because they just don't care. All right, and when I say they don't care, I don't say that in a mean way, but think about how often during the day the content on CNN.com changes. It's quite a bit. They might have something, and 5 minutes later they may have moved stuff around. They don't have time to do all that stuff. All right? All right, and there's plenty of other examples like that, but you can see. And what they'll say is, not supported, use this instead. All right? And again, notice this one's not deprecated. It doesn't say deprecated, even though technically it is. You're told not to use it. The same thing I think will happen with the M tag. If we go down here and take a look, that's the new one. It doesn't say replaces. There's still an I tag, you know, etc. All right. So with some of this stuff, you know, notice how no frames, not supported in HTML5, and that's the newest version of HTML. That's what we're using. So that one you can't use. All right. But virtually everything else in here that's red, there'll be some, you know, again, here's another one, but there will be some examples, but almost all of them, you can still use them. All right. You shouldn't, but you can. All right. Now, they're going to go through here, and when they go through and they talk about brackets, I'm not going to do that because we're not using that editor. But I'm going to have you bring up at that time when we get to that point, if you don't already have it up, we'll bring up Visual Studio Code and we'll start taking a look at some of the stuff that's in there. All right. See, one thing the reason I'm bringing this up instead of what I had yesterday, I like a PDF because I can page through it. But when I use Vital Source, I've got to use it over here. And sometimes when I use the page forward, it doesn't work. And then it's a real pain in the butt because I have to manually go in and change a bunch of stuff. I don't like that. All right. So the main structure of an HTML document. All right. Let's just take a look at what they've got here because I would not even call this complete. All right. So when we look at it, the first thing that you see there, it's got an exclamation point. First of all, HTML is a tag-based language. So your tags are always within less than signs and greater than signs. Probably about 80 to 90% of tags have both an opening tag and a closing tag. Here's one that doesn't. Technically, this right here, hopefully you can see that in blue, technically, that's the only thing that really and truly is not HTML. All right? That line right there is what's called a doc type or a document type designation. Back in the olden days, like in the 90s, all right, when there were earlier versions of HTML, you had to write a lot of stuff in there. You had to, whether it was a transitional or it was something else, and it was a lot. Probably you typed over 100 characters. When they came back with HTML5, they said, you know what? We don't need all that stuff. Let's just say that if it says Doctype HTML, that it's an HTML5 or above document. And that's what it means. That's literally is what it means. All right. Now, kind of weird. Notice this is really the only tag that most people put in uppercase. Virtually every other thing you do in HTML is in lowercase. Now, if that bugs you, you can put it in lowercase. So you can put the word Doctype in uppercase, lowercase, you can mix the case. So if you wanted a capital D and the rest of it to be lowercase. All right. Most people do it one way or the other. You've already seen this, but if I come in here, and this is something I'm working on for another class, but if I come in here, let's see. That's nice. All right, if I come in here and I'm just going to very quickly create a new page in here. All right, so let's do it here. And I'll call it just junk.html. All right, there it is. Now, if I put in this and I hit tab, you'll notice it puts it in uppercase. But if you don't like that, you can change it, is what I'm telling you. All right? So, in fact, let's take a look at the one they've got here, because this is a little more thorough than the one that's in our book. And then we'll go back and kind of compare and contrast them. So again, this is the document type designation. That's what it is. All right? Then this is the beginning HTML tag. This is the ending HTML tag. It used to be that when you did the beginning HTML tag, you did it just like that. You still can. But you may get a warning, usually not an error, but you may get a warning from the validator saying it's not sure what language you're using. So most people put it back and put it in there because the language is English. That is the default language, but most people put it in there if for no other reason, just so their stuff validates okay. All right. So this says this is the beginning of the HTML document. This is the end of the HTML document. This thing right here is known as an attribute. For example, each one of you have a height. Each one of you have a weight, an eye color, a hair color. Those are attributes. EN is the value of the attribute. So the name of the tag is HTML. The attribute is lang, and the value of the attribute is EN. It's commonplace to take the value of the attribute and put it in double quotes. Typically, it'll also take single quotes, all right? And a lot of times you can get away without putting anything in there, but it sometimes screws up the system. So I will expect that when you put in an attribute and you put in its value, you'll put that value in double quotes. All right, because that's just the way most people do it. All right, then you'll notice, or you may not notice, we have two sections in our document. We have what's called a head section, and we have what's called a body section. And what's the difference between them? The head section, everything that's in here does not appear on the web page. That's information, and a lot of times it includes what are called meta tags, as you can see right there. It's information basically the browser uses. Okay? Everything that's in here does appear on the web page. So when you look in here, in fact, a lot of times what you'll see is you'll see that tabbed over like that. Because basically, this is the parent of everything. So HTML has got two direct descendants, head and body. I just leave it like this. I mean, you can do it whatever, you can do it literally whatever way you want. It's not going to hurt anything. All right. So in our head section, the first thing, we have 3 meta tags in here. And there are a lot more meta tags that you can put in than these 3. We will get to them in a later chapter, but let's just talk about these 3. All right. The first meta tag that's in there says char set, and it says UTF-8. All right. Back when I was about your age, I remember going to a computer show in Chicago, Illinois, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Now, it may not sound slick to you, but it was to me at the time. They had 2 gentlemen that were sitting right next to one another doing a demonstration. And one gentleman was American, the other gentleman was Japanese. And the American would be typing stuff into his computer, and on the other computer it came up in Japanese. And the person who was typing then would answer them in Japanese, and it came back on that person's computer as English. So what does that have to do with anything? Back in the day when I was about your age, the character set we used was different. We had one character set. It was called Ascii, A-S-C-I-I, which stands for American Standard Code for Information Interchange. It basically had all the keys you have on your keyboard, plus some extra keys, like the divide sign with the dash and the dot above it and below it, a cent sign, and a few other things. The point is, there were 255 of them, 256, I guess. They went from 0 to 255. And that worked out fine until we became more national and then started to become more international. because we didn't have characters for other languages. All right, we had characters just for the English language. Okay, so over time, that started to change. So what we did was we went from the character set of Ascii to the character set that's known as Unicode. What's the difference? Ascii allows for 256 characters. Unicode, the last time I checked, was over 100,000. So it had every single language there currently is, plus there's room for expansion in there. All right? And I think the UTF is like Universal Transformation Format, and it's an 8-bit format. You don't need to know any of that. All right? But the point is that this says that we're using the Unicode character set, which is what 99.9999 whatever percent of people use anyway. All right? So that's the first one. Then this one, just gotta love that Microsoft. All right? It's a hack that basically says, hey, if you're using an older version of Internet Explorer, basically treat it as though you're using Edge. Now, that's not exactly what it is, but I'm just giving you the English translation of it. All right? So it's basically, like I said, it's a hack. All right, let me get rid of this. And you look at what's here next. This, I think I talked a little bit about this yesterday, and I think it's about chapter 8 in your book that we'll get to in a few weeks. That's on what's called RWD, or responsive website design, where you want your website to look good on any device. Doesn't matter if it's a phone, a tablet, a laptop, a desktop, whatever. And that's what this works with. Viewport is what you're using to currently view the site. All right, and what we're saying here is, by default, we want to use the entire width of whatever site we're using. And we want it scaled to 100%. All right, I mean, and that's exactly what that is. So it's one of those things, you know, I watch this guy on YouTube. He's got videos about all sorts of things, computers, and he'll always say, it's boilerplate code. You don't have to worry about it. It's just something you have to put in. That's kind of what this is. All right. Again, there are other tags, other meta tags that you can put in here. I want you to realize that. There are other tags that you can put in. And you'd say, well, like what? Some of the other ones that you'll use most often, again, we'll see this in a later chapter, have to deal with what I talked about yesterday with that search engine optimization. So what you can do is you can put in keywords, etc., so that when Google comes and looks through your site, it looks at your keywords and says, oh, are you actually using those in your site? All right. It's called, it basically, it goes through your website. It's called spidering your site. All right, this goes all the way through. So we'll look at those later. That's not a big thing. Now this, just so you see it, I'm going to change this. All right. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the word document there, but I'm going to put my name in there. All right. Why? Just to show you, and I'm going to right mouse click on here, and I'm going to open it with Live Server. And what you'll notice up there, there's my name. So the title is what appears in that tab up there. Now, not only are we going to do that, but very shortly, you'll learn how to add what's called a favicon. You'll notice I just get the favicon for my browser, but this is from W3 Schools, and maybe you can see the W there, etc. You can put any, I mean, you literally could put a favicon of your own face in there. Now, it's going to be that small that people probably couldn't recognize it, but you can do that. And it's typically considered to be a good idea to put a favicon in. We'll get into that, just not right now. We'll get into it in a later chapter. But the point of telling you this is, again, you see that everything that's in here does not appear on the web page itself. All right? It's information that the browser needs. Now, the other thing, too, with this, the order in which you put this stuff doesn't matter. Some people like their title first. Some people will change around the order of the meta tags. It doesn't matter. One thing you should not do is this. If you have something in double quotes like this here, that means it's one string. Don't do this and hit enter. It may even work if you do that. It might work. but it might not, or it might work for a while and then stop working. So don't do that. But what you can do is this is one attribute and value here. This is another attribute and value here. You can take this and put that, since it's the beginning of a new thing, on its own line. That's totally fine. And again, I could do the same kind of thing right here. And it depends on how anal you are about this stuff. Some people, I mean, I've watched them, and everything's got to line up. So if that matters to you, then go ahead and do that. If it doesn't matter to you, don't. It really and truly doesn't matter. Now, I'm going to show you a couple things, other things. One I did yesterday, but I'm going to show it to you again, that oftentimes you see in here. And the first one is link. All right. So if we had a CSS directory and a file called styles.css, that's where we'd reference it. So you load your external CSS file in your head section. If I try to take that line and put it in my body section, it's not going to work. All right. I may or may not get an error, but I know I won't be able to access my CSS. The other thing that you oftentimes see in here, and this is what we'll get to about 4 or 5 weeks from now, is I'm going to type in here source. I guess it didn't like that, so it should be script. All right. And it'll be something like source equal, I don't know, whatever, .js. That's how you bring in JavaScript files. All right. So again, what you do in the head section does not appear directly on the web page itself. What does is what's in the body section. All right. Now, I just want to start mentioning a few things to you here. When you look here, there is an extension that if you want to download it, I showed you yesterday live server, but a lot of people like to come to the extensions and find one that's called Prettier. All right. And they choose this one right here. I think I've got it in there already. But what it's supposed to do is once you save, it's supposed to line things up for you. And there's several of these. Notice there's Prettier for all sorts of stuff. All right. All right. Let's close that. Whoops. And come back. Come on. It's not the one I want. There we go. Oh, I was going in here. Okay. All right. So let's see. Now, where am I? I know where I am, but I don't want to be right here. I want to be back Untitled. There we go. All right. So when you get into the body section, this is where you add the tags and the content. You'll notice that if I want to, I can just start typing. So again, I can come in here and say lorem 50, like we looked at the other day, or yesterday. And then I can come back in here and I can look at this. I guess I didn't save. So file save, try it again. And there's my text. I know it's not, you can't see it that well, but there it is. That's not a paragraph. That's just random text that I threw in here. All right. And you might say, well, what's the big deal? You can go in and you can use your CSS to take a paragraph and format it. You can't do it that easily with just random text like this. All right. So I want to just show you a few of the things that are in here. Now, this is all stuff that we're going to run over, and a lot of it will be in this chapter. But I do want to mention to you, you may or may not have noticed yesterday, because I'm going to do it right now, and I'm going to put in this, H1, and this is an H1 tag. Big deal, right? I'm going to save and come back, and this is an H1 tag. Now, it's not really that big. Again, my browser right now is at 250%. I just want you to be able to see everything. All right. So what I want to show you is there are actually 6 of these. And it's a little bit counterintuitive in that as the numbers get bigger, the size of the text will get smaller. So H1 is actually the biggest tag, H6 is actually the smallest tag, etc. All right, and there is a way to manually, or to do this the other way. I don't remember what the shortcut is, but there is a way to do that. So, and I just want to show you this. Now, one thing you have to realize as we start going through this stuff is, in many ways, this is a very forgiving language. What I mean is, typically what's going to happen is, if I start one tag, let's say, with a 6, but I end it with an 8 or something like that, which doesn't exist, I don't get an error. It just won't resonate the way that it's supposed to. Does that make sense? And that's why when I say it's a forgiving language, that's exactly what I mean. So let me save this and go back and run it again. And you can see the difference in sizes. Now, again, if I put it at 100%, you can see how small the H6 actually is. Can you change that? Of course you can. You use CSS to change that. We'll be talking about that very shortly. All right. But like I said, I'm making it bigger so you can see everything that's in there. You normally on most web pages, I don't think I've ever seen an H5 or an H6 because they are typically that small. You usually don't even see an H4. Now, the other thing too is, so well, yeah, probably you see a lot of H1s. You should only have one H1 tag per page. Look at it this way. I know that I'm older than all of you, but if you look at a newspaper, and if you know what's a newspaper, hopefully you at least know what the heck a newspaper is. And you hold it up and you unfold it, there's just one big headline at the top. That's what the H1 is supposed to signify. You can have as many H2s, H3s, etc. as you need as you're breaking up a page. All right? So let's go back. I don't want to get too off topic rather, so let's see. So I think we've gone through this, hopefully at least. I mean, what I gave you is more than what's in here. They just put a bunch of paragraphs in. We can do that too. It's no big thing. All right, as it says, although you can code in lowercase, uppercase, or mixed, they say you use lowercase because it's easier to read. I say you use the lowercase because it's the standard. All right, you don't want to stand out at a place. You know, especially when you're going in there to get hired, you want to fit in. If you think, well, I can do this a lot better than you can, you don't tell them that. All kidding aside, I had a student when I was teaching in Wisconsin. The guy was about 50, really, really intelligent. He was from India, and English was a second language, but he spoke it very well. And he was a military guy. People wanted to hire him. He's military. He's from India, so he was an immigrant, etc. He would have been a success story. And he went in for an interview, and he came back, and we were talking the next day. I said, how'd it go? And he goes, geez, Jeff, I don't understand. He said it was going really, really well. I said, and? He said, yeah. Then he asked me if I had any questions, and I said, no, but I said, I've been looking at your website, and I've got a lot of things I'd recommend that you change. I said, you told him that during an interview. He said, yeah. I said, well, that's a good way to not get hired. You could tell them that after you're hired and you've been there for a while and proven yourself, but that's not really a good way to go in an interview. All right. So you want to fit in. That's the standard. I don't want to sit and read this stuff to you. If you need more than you think I gave you, then take a look at the stuff that's in there. All right. All right. So how to code elements and tags. We've already started talking about this. Some tags are what are referred to as empty tags. That means they don't have an ending tag. Now, you may or may not get this. After you see it, I'm sure you will. But if I come in here and do this, so I'm going to come in here, I'm going to get rid of all these. I'll leave the H1 tag, okay? And I'm going to put a paragraph in here. So I'm going to get rid of all this and just put in a P tag. All right? And I'm going to just put in, hi, my name is, put in a bunch of spaces here, and Jeff, like that. And because I screwed that up, it didn't give me my ending P tag. But you might think it's going to print like that. But watch what happens. So I'm going to save. I'm going to go look at it. And where is it? Because what it does is the browser looks at all white space and it considers it a single space. And it doesn't matter with that white space if that's hitting the enter key, hitting the tab key, or hitting the space bar. So what if I wanted it to look like that? I don't know why I do that, but what if I wanted it to look like that? No, it's you put a tag in. And you put in a tag that's called, I believe this is the right one, this is how often I use it. It's called a pre-tag, which means the stuff's been pre-formatted. All right, I'm going to save. And there you go. Now, I mean, would you want to do that? Probably not, but at least you know how, if for some reason you want to. All right, but the other question that comes up with that is, okay, so I see what you're saying, so I'm going to do it like this. I'll do everything you said. I'll put everything on one line, etc. Have it all nice and spaced over exactly the way that it's supposed to be. Forget about that pre-tag. We're going to get rid of that in just a second. All right. So everything looks cool. But if for some reason I'm just the kind of person that I want, for example, I want there to be 4 spaces there. All right. But if I go 1, 2, 3, 4 and I save, you've already seen I don't get those. But what if I really want 4 spaces? I can force that in there by using what's called an HTML entity. So I can put ampersand NBSP, which stands for non-breaking space. And I'm going to go and copy that. Now there's 4 spaces. I saved. I come back and take a look at it. There are my spaces. Kind of weird that sometimes you got to force things to happen. But that, again, that's just the way that they are. In the same way, just to show you quickly, you oftentimes see at the bottom of your page, you have what's called a footer. All right, and if I wanted to put in here, created by Jeff Scott, and I wanted to put a copyright sign in there, I can actually go out to the internet, find it, and copy it in there, and it'll work. But I can also say ampersand copy 2021. And you'll notice that when I do that, and we come over here, there's that sign. There's one for copy. There's one for trademark. There are a lot of them, and we'll look at those a little bit later. All right. But what we were talking about in the book is, in the book, they had some of these tags in here that didn't have end tags. Well, let's suppose for a second, for whatever reason, I do want my name is Jeff, and I want it to be on 4 different lines. I do want that. I can force that to happen by coming in here and putting in what's called a BR tag. BR stands for line break. All right, and it does not have an ending tag. It has just a beginning. Again, I don't know exactly why I'd want to do this or do it like this, but I'm just, again, showing you that it is permissible to do it like that, so you see the difference. All right. Not only is there that tag, but you maybe have seen this already. I'm going to get rid of these BR tags. Not only is there a BR tag, which stands for line break, but there is also what's called an HR tag, which stands for horizontal rule. And it's easier to show it to you. So it's an HR. That's it. You can use CSS to play with the thickness of that. You don't have to have it, by default, it's 100%. You don't have to have it be that way. You can change the color. You can change a lot of stuff. And that's, again, what we're going to be getting into very shortly. All right. All right. How to code attributes. Guess what? We've already started looking at this. All right. Well, let's get to the big one, the one that people like. And that is, how do we go in and get a hyperlink? All right. Well, it's not hard at all. So let's just take a look at that. All right. So let me jump back into here. And one thing, again, I'm trying to teach you what I consider to be best practices. All right, so I'm going to show you what I consider to be the wrong way of doing it first. So let me come in here and put in a paragraph tag. And I'm going to say, I want it to say, click here to go to the Rankin Technical College website. All right, you probably have all seen things like that. All right, right now there's no hyperlink tag in there. So if I do bring this up, it looks just like that, which isn't going to help me because I can't click and go there. But what people do, and this is recommended that you don't do this, is this is the word that gets underlined. It will be in a minute, but you shouldn't use words like here. You should actually highlight with the underline what they're going to go to. So if I wanted to, I could come in here and I can say A, because it's called an anchor tag, href, hypertext reference equals https://rankin.edu. All right, and I have my beginning tag, and now I need my end tag. And I'm just going to hit enter. It's totally fine to do that. Now you'll notice that if I do this, there's two things that are technically wrong with what I just did. All right, so I'm going to show them both to you. So here's the first one. It's the word here. Now you may or may not have noticed it, and it's kind of hard to see. I don't know, like Nick, if you can see that back there. But if I put my mouse over the word here, it shows me where I'm going to go. The problem with that is you can fake it out. In other words, if you really know what you're doing, you can say you're going there where you're really redirecting to someplace else. Why does that matter? Well, you're talking to a guy who has three daughters that on each one of their computers years ago, there was a picture going on from above Beyonce. She was, what do they say, dropping a new album. All right. And they all clicked it, and guess what? It was all malware. All right. And it said, but Dad, looks, it says that's where we're going. That doesn't mean that's where you're going. It should be. All right. But it doesn't necessarily mean that. So what we really should do, in fact, notice if I click it, this is the other wrong thing. Guess what? I left my page. I have left my page, and I have gone, because look, Jeffrey Paul Scott right here, but when I click it, now I'm on Rankin's page. So I'm going to show you how to fix both of those. The first one is a really super simple fix. All right. I mean, what do I want here? I might just want, maybe that's too much, but let's put that so it's underlined. Rankin Technical College website, not here. So I'm going to change this so that it says not click here, but I'm going to say click to go to the, now I'm going to put it in, Rankin Technical College, and you'll notice I've got to take, and what I'll do here is I won't have the period. See that the period is not part of that? You understand what I'm saying? And notice now if I save this and I come back here, that's better. So I can click anywhere in here. If that's too much, we could have just done website, etc. But hopefully you get the idea. All right. So going back and breaking that down, this tag is called an anchor tag. And this is where you want it to go. Is it possible for you to go to a place inside of your own page and jump from one part of your page to another? Yes. You're going to learn how to do that very shortly. Now, the other thing that's wrong with this, we've got one attribute in here called href, hypertext reference. And this is telling us where to go. But if we come in here and we add this, target equals underscore blank. See that? Target equals underscore blank. I'm going to save this. And what did that do? It's easiest to show you. Doesn't look any different. But you'll see up here where I've got Jeffrey Paul Scott. Now when I click, it opened it in a new tab. That's considered, if maybe you've heard the word, maybe you haven't, that's good etiquette. Because if you don't put in that target tag, people might think that, wow, that's part of your website. Now, typically with ranking, they wouldn't do that. But with sometimes when you set up sites, especially if you're going to link to somebody else's site, you should always do it that way and open it up in a new tab. All right? Anything that we've gone over so far that doesn't make sense? All right, we'll hit a couple more pages, then we'll take a break. All right, and there's a lot of attributes that you can use. We're going to get into them. All right, some of these attributes will be what are called Boolean attributes, meaning they're true or false. Sometimes when you've got a Boolean attribute and you create them, and you will be soon, you start them with the word is married, is union. All right, and remember the computer it's a literal animal. So in other words, you probably, if somebody says, oh wow, are you pregnant? Well, kind of, sort of. No, not to the computer. It's yes or no. It's like if you're married, but you say, well, I'm separated. It doesn't matter. To the computer, is married has a value of true, meaning you're married, or false, meaning you're not married. And we're going to get into all this stuff. All right. So what if you want comments? So in other words, what if I want to explain something? I don't really want it to be part of my document, but let's say I come in here and I want to put a comment in here that says, go to the Rankin Technical College website. I don't know. Or how about this? Example of an href attribute. Something like that. So when you create comments, they're ignored by the system. They're still part of your page, all right? But they're ignored. They're passed over basically by the browser. You start a comment with a less than sign, then an exclamation point, whoops, and then 2 dashes or minus signs, and you end it with minus greater than sign. All right. Now what's going to confuse you is when we get into it, that's not the way you make comments in a CSS file. All right. That's not the way you make comments in a JavaScript file. All right. But that's just the way that it is. So that's an example in there of making a comment. All right. Now, one thing, don't do this. I mean, literally, when I started teaching, I'll always remember this because the first time I stepped into a classroom to teach in my life was teaching a night class in Marshfield, Wisconsin. And I said, we talked about code. They had like 2 tests and 3 assignments before we ever, started writing code. And they were supposed to figure out their grade at that time. So they added all their points, divided it by the total pass. It was simple. And I said, but I'd like you to comment so you get used to writing comments. So I had one person, literally, every line that they didn't have anything in, they put a comment in there saying, this is a blank line. And I circled them all and wrote back, no, it's not. Because the only place you should put in comments are, the litmus test is, geez, I wonder if somebody will be able to understand it. Then it probably needs a comment. All right. Otherwise, just leave them off. You can indent. You can put comments over multiple lines if you want to do that. Not any kind of problem doing that. So that's the beginning of the HTML part. It's 8:57. Let's come back at 10 after 9, and we'll go over the CSS part. All right.